Today's episode is exciting because we're going to be talking about heat therapy, very specifically the benefits of sauna and something called full body hyperthermia.
If we think back to what our body does to get rid of infections, it is exactly that. It heats the system up. And so probably many people think that a fever might even come from the bug, the virus, the bacteria, but that's actually not the case. The fever is coming from our own immune system.
3 days a week of sitting in the sauna, 20 to 25, 30 minutes, was like a 40% less risk of getting dementia,
Yes.
40%.
I want everyone to think about when was the last time you sweat? And if you're not sweating on a regular basis, you really need to check in with that. And maybe you're saying I have a low body temperature and I don't sweat easily. That can be a problem.
Welcome to Rethink My Health Radio Show and Podcast, where each week we come to you from our studios in Atlanta, Georgia, talking about chronic diseases that matter to you, your family, your loved ones, your friends. As I say time and time again, they do really matter most to us, the research scientists, the practitioners, the doctors, in the trenches, day in, day out, combating chronic diseases. We're at an all-time high right now in our country with chronic diseases, all types of uncertainty with our healthcare system. We need real answers. We need real solutions. Today's episode is exciting because it's a topic that I've personally been studying for well over 3 decades. And the research is so compelling. It's so simple that it's mind-boggling that most physicians do not tell their patients to do this. And we're going to be talking about heat therapy, very specifically the benefits of sauna, traditional sauna, infrared sauna, and something called full body hyperthermia. What's the difference? So stay tuned. This is going to be an exciting show. Why we picked this topic? Because chronic diseases are exploding right now. We're seeing cancer on the rise, heart disease, number 1 and 2 killer in the United States, taking the lives of well over 600 to 700,000 Americans each year, according to the CDC. We made some headway in diagnostics. Prevention is the key. What's the best way to treat cancer? Prevent it, don't get it. What's the best way to treat cardiovascular disease? Don't get it. Test, do diagnostics, talk to your practitioner. But there are certain strategies, and we believe as functional, integrative, natural practitioners, that heat therapy has been studied for thousands and thousands of years. As a matter of fact, if you've never heard of Hippocrates, every practitioner that graduates from their, whether it's medical school, naturopathic medical school, nurse practitioner, all know about Hippocrates, and Hippocrates says, first do no harm. But Hippocrates also said, show me a way to create a fever, and I shall cure any disease. I'm Dr. Gez Agolli, going to be your host here, Doctor of Natural Medicine, Doctor of Public Health, integrative practitioner, founder of Progressive Medical. I am passionate about functional integrative medicine. Joining with me in the studio today is my colleague, Dr. Cheryl Burdette. She is a world-renowned educator, and she's been studying heat therapy as well. Cheryl, thank you so much for coming.
My pleasure.
Really appreciate it. What an exciting topic. And you know, we're living in a society right now where there's a lot of mistrust and so much information out there and who to believe and who not believe. And I want to make things very simple for our viewers and listeners today because it sounds so simple. Heat therapy can make a huge impact. Let's start off with saunas. And then we're going to get into the really interesting full body hypothermia. Over the years, you've been studying different therapies and how heat therapy. Let's just talk a little bit about some of the benefits. What have you researched when it comes to saunas? And then we'll get into specifics of why somebody should do it. And there are some differences between a finished sauna and infrared. Yeah. So what have you, in the literature that you viewed, let's talk about saunas first of all.
Well, it's very impressive, quite frankly, and to find the amount of peer-reviewed scientific studies, to find that amount of data when there's not a natural profit center at the end, because this is how a lot of studies get funded, is because the idea is that there's going to be a return on investment of the funding of the research in terms of a drug or a pharmaceutical that will produce revenue. And so saunas don't really fall into that category. They don't have as much of a natural profit revenue to them. And so to see that amount of data behind them when that's not the case is quite impressive. So if you go to and you look at peer-reviewed medical research, you find that there is very good data with saunas, not only in terms of detoxification, sweating, getting things out of our body, but also really shines in terms of cardiovascular disease. And one of the reasons you see that as a very front and center part of heat therapies is because if we get hot, the major mechanism by which the body deals with that, or one of, is to vasodilate, create sweat to cool the system down. So when we put our body through something like a heat treatment, even any type of sweating, so even backing up from saunas, even to exercise. So all sweating is good because it removes toxicity from the body, assuming that we're maintaining good electrolytes. You could have too much. We can talk about that. But in general, sweating is good. It gets things out of the body. I want everyone to think about, when was the last time you sweat? And if you're not sweating on a regular basis, you really need to check in with that. And maybe you're saying, I have a low body temperature and I don't sweat easily. And we'll talk about that too, because that can be a problem. That can be a reason that you're not going to stay as well for as long. So sweating is good, gets things out, but then in addition to that, it allows our body to, I'll say, exercise in a certain way. And what I mean by that is the vessel practices letting go of heat. It practices thermodynamic regulation. And when it does this, it means that your vessels are exercising. They're opening up and constricting. And there is literally muscle around the vessel. It's called smooth muscle. And so this is why saunas are also very much linked to benefits with cardiovascular disease. And I'll drill down even more that women who do more saunas and who exercise more, their body practices thermodynamic regulation, and they're even less likely to have, for example, a hot flash. And I'll pull it full circle. Hot flashes are a risk factor for cardiovascular disease. So sweating is good. We need to practice sweating. It helps our body get rid of toxins. It helps our vessels stay strong. And so it has a really important role in terms of prevention of various conditions out there. And so we shouldn't be afraid of warming our system up. And so if you're out there thinking, gosh, I stay cold all the time, this can be a symptom of low thyroid function. And this can be a reason why low thyroid can be, a risk factor for other things as well. So you got to open up those pores and get things out.
Absolutely. A lot of patients that have come in over the years, last several decades at Progressive Medical, once we do a history on them, our licensed practitioners come back with data that most of these individuals that are chronically ill are non-excretors, not sweating properly. And obviously that's a big red flag, because as you mentioned earlier, helps the microcirculation of the body. And what's interesting is that if you take a look at some of the studies when it comes to the benefits of infrared sauna for cardiovascular disease, you'll notice when you go to a traditional sauna, and I want to hit this point very, very clearly. We're not against traditional saunas. I think there's some benefit there as well. It's just a different type of mechanism. Infrared is actually not contraindicated for cardiovascular disease. As a matter of fact, Mayo talked about this, and they did some research on this, that their end-stage congestive heart failure patients actually improve their ejection fraction, which is the functionality of the heart muscle, by numerous percentage points. And it made a massive difference, because exactly what you're talking about, that thermodynamic, that dynamic of the body, of constantly pumping that smooth muscle and contracting, which is very important. That's why exercise is so important. And this does not replace exercise. You can use it in addition to exercise, but it's a great strategy. Let's pause for a second and hit home on toxicity. That's a word that a lot of Americans may be hearing as a marketing term as well. Toxicity is definitely a concern, and the Environmental Protection Agency does research on a yearly basis. And the last studies I looked at were 2024, where there was well over 4.3 billion pounds of chemicals emitted into our air, our water, our land. And where does it go to eventually? It goes into the human body, and because we're a sponge. So even if you don't do testing, if you're chronically ill, we do recommend that you look at whether it's heavy metal toxicity, which is the toxic body burden, that's a provocation urine test, or you're looking at environmental toxicants, or you're looking at mycotoxins. These are storing in your body. And if you've been from doctor to doctor to doctor and you're just not getting the answers, and they say your blood works perfect, but there's other reasons why, toxicity is probably one of them. That's why we're big believers as functional integrative doctors, and we've been talking about infrared saunas for probably 25 plus years.
Easy.
And we've had them in our clinics, and we encourage all of our patients that can put this into their budget. This is one of the greatest investments. As a matter of fact, in Finland, I believe it's over 90% of households have a sauna.
Yes.
There's a reason for that. Yeah, it's colder there. I get it. But it's a lifestyle. This needs to be a lifestyle. Just like exercising, just like eating proper, good whole foods, we believe that saunas should be a lifestyle because the research is compelling and it makes a huge impact on detoxification. So that's one of the reasons why. Dr. Burdette, what happens to the body when you raise the core temperature? I made that powerful statement from Hippocrates. It's a pretty powerful statement. Show me a way to create a fever, and I shall cure any disease. Hippocrates, the father of all medicine, we can't argue with that wisdom. What's the mechanism? How does that work?
Yeah, in fact, it does a lot of things for us. And so, and just like you said, and Hippocrates said, if we think back to what our body does to get rid of infections, it is exactly that. It heats the system up. And so probably many people think that a fever might even come from the bug, the virus, the bacteria, but that's actually not the case. The fever is coming from our own immune system, and it's our body's way of dealing with these bugs that are in our system. And so maybe you're thinking, oh, I have low metabolism, I stay colder. You could have a thyroid issue, and that can set you up to make it easier for things to incubate in you and stay and live and not completely get killed off. And so that's what a fever does. And so it's very interesting. So it does a number of things. First off, it will increase the activity of the white blood cells in our body. And when that happens, they increase something called interferon gamma. And that is stimulates the immune system so that our white blood cells will pick up the pace. I always think of the white blood cells like little Pac-Man traveling around, eating up the bugs they're supposed to. It's called phagocytosis. And so fever will increase the amount of white blood cells, but their activity, that phagocytosis. And it can do that through a mechanism called interferon gamma. But another thing that it does is it increases something called heat shock proteins. And heat shock proteins got their name because they were first discovered during fever. And what we saw was that they protected proteins in the body. So one thing that can happen if we have too much of a fever is it causes misfolding of proteins in our system, and that can be quite dangerous to us. So as we spike a fever, the body says, you know, I know how to deal with this, and let me make these heat shock proteins that are protective. But they do more than just protect us from a fever. In fact, we found that they are helpful in terms of being anti-cancer, and they help with cardiovascular disease. And there's even this strange phenomenon where in autistic children, that when they get a fever, they can have these breakthrough moments of clarity. Kiddos who aren't making eye contact, who are inside themselves feeling a lot of irritation, just trapped in a body that's not doing what they want it to do. And then all of a sudden in a fever, so think about how you usually feel in a fever. We feel miserable, right? This is not the moment we feel the most clear. But for autistic kiddos, they can all of a sudden have this moment of breakthrough clarity. And they attribute that to increasing these heat shock proteins. And so heat, of course, does that. Now, it turns out, since we've learned more about heat shock proteins, and we're focused on things that generate heat in the body today, but there are other phytonutrients that do this as well. So compounds from broccoli, and if I said, tell me a food that's good for you, people would probably, certainly broccoli would be on their list. Well, it also increases heat shock proteins. A nutrient that we use for gut lining to make it less permeable, less leaky, glutamine, also increases heat shock proteins. So we find these things in nature in addition to heat that increase them. But the go-to way to do that is through heat. And these heat shock proteins really modulate function within the body, from autistic kiddos to cardiovascular disease, even to cancer. And so we can harness this power that would come from our immune system normally and heat up the body, yes, to clear chronic infections, but to also shift the immune system so that we can deal with even some, heat will interrupt rapidly dividing cells, and those tend to be bacteria and viruses. They move at a fast pace to try to take over, but so does cancer. And so when we look at some of those similarities, we can borrow what we know from dealing with infections and pull it over to cancer care as well. And we're seeing this across the board, repurposing of medications that were often used for infections. Ivermectin's a perfect example of this, being pulled over and used in terms of anti-cancer properties too, for a similar reason. It targets those places that are upregulated in a rapidly dividing cell. So you see crossover between things that kill bugs and things that kill cancer.
It's a very synergistic approach, and that's why I believe that based on the research and based on clinical evidence that we've seen here at Progressive Medical, because we've been promoting infrared saunas and saunas in general as a lifestyle. This is a lifestyle.
Do you have one at home?
I've got one at home.
I've got one at home.
I've always had one.
And when I had a very simple Airbnb in Finland, it had one in it too.
Yeah, like I said, 90% of Finnish, anybody out there listening to us from Finland, you guys were forward thinking, putting in saunas into your homes and businesses and hotels, which is very exciting to hear that. And I think more and more Americans are seeing the benefit of it. And I'm going to encourage our listeners out there, if you can budget this, you can definitely put in an infrared or a sauna into your home. They have portable ones as well. But if you're battling cancer, we're going to talk about that also later in this segment, because there's a different strategy called full body hyperthermia. The Germans are way ahead of us when it comes to full body hyperthermia. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the differences, because that's medically supervised, but that takes some of the benefits that Dr. Burdette was talking about, and it just puts it on a totally different level. And we'll talk about in a second, because that's really raising the core temperature. Unfortunately in our country, what we've done now is that certain individuals, and no offense to moms that are hovercrafts because they're hovering around the children, oh my gosh, you got a fever, I got to give them Tylenol. And typically, when the body's raising to 101, 102, that's not a major concern, right? Now, if it's getting past 103, 104, you should seek medical advice, call your pediatrician, things of that nature. But you have to allow that body, because the body intrinsically, it's so intelligent that it knows it's out of homeostasis, it's out of that balance, and it's probably due to an infection. Let the body do its job, support the body, right?
Yes.
Put a cold compress, use certain minerals, call your pediatrician to get that comfort if it's a child. If it's you as an adult, let the body do what it needs to do and let it heal. As a matter of fact, we interviewed Dr. Dale Bredesen, who is a well-known neurologist that put together an Apollo program for dementia and Alzheimer's. And his program talks about the benefits of sauna. He actually came on our podcast and he said the research is clear. 3 days a week of sitting in a sauna, 20 to 25, 30 minutes, right? Was like a 40% less risk of getting dementia, 40%, 6 days a week, 60% less risk. That's coming from Dr. Bredesen, board certified neurologist. There's tremendous benefits to infrared sauna. And I love the fact that you mentioned the word phagocytosis. That's one of my best words of mechanism in medical school on immunology. I love immunology. And phagocytosis is exactly like you said. It's like a Pac-Man grabbing that infection and getting rid of the body. And it does increase phagocytosis. It does increase tumor necrosis alpha, B cells, T cells. It really helps the body clear these infections. And whether you're going to be on an antibiotic or whether you're going to be on some type of antiviral, it just assists the human body. And that's what's really exciting about infrared. So let's get into the mechanism when it comes to infrared and traditional saunas. It's very, very important. So if you're not sweating, right, there's different strategies that you need to do. Exercise, going into a warm bath, and using these saunas. What happens is when you go into a traditional sauna, typically it's about 180 degrees Fahrenheit to 220. We've not hit Celsius yet, what is for Celsius, 37 to 40 Celsius. You're actually raising that temperature, but it's going into the epidermis, okay? And the infrared sauna literally can penetrate, that heat coil can penetrate into the dermis, which is the middle layer of the skin. Now, it doesn't go to the hyperdermis, which is really the core of where a lot of these toxins lodge. That's where you need full body hyperthermia. We'll talk about that afterwards, because I want to devote our next segment on this podcast to the medically supervised hyperthermia. I think there's benefits to both of these saunas, right? Finnish and traditional. Whether you go to your gym, most gyms have them. I think one of the biggest differences, you can't stay as long in a Finnish traditional sauna, maybe 10, 20 minutes tops, because it's unphysiological heat. Infrared, you can stay longer. What are you telling your clients and your patients about the difference? Because a lot of people say, oh, what's the difference?
Yeah, and so the infrared, unlike a Finnish sauna, and so when most of us think about sauna, we probably think about steam and that vision of the Finnish sauna. And sometimes there's steam and sometimes there isn't. But just like you said, that goes up to 180 degrees. And so you're in there for 10 or 15 minutes. You shouldn't stay longer than that. In fact, if you stay too much longer, there could be some negative consequences to that. So infrared, you want to at least get to 120? Yes.
It's between 120 and 150.
Yes, thank you. And so at that level, you can stay longer. And so infrared's going to heat more deeply into your tissue than a Finnish sauna. And it doesn't warm the skin as much. And so that's why you're able to tolerate it, giving you deeper detoxification and more preventative qualities and properties. Now, when we move on to medically supervised hyperthermia, they isolate just a single wavelength, and that wavelength, the UVA instead of UVB, does not heat water. And so if we don't heat water, we don't heat sweat, we don't heat water in the skin, so it now takes it to the next level. Your skin doesn't feel hot, it doesn't feel like you're burning, but your core temperature is really able to increase. And so now we're able to drive this age-old medicine that's so powerful. Look, from Hippocrates, even more in the 20s or 30s, there was a Dr. Cooley, and he worked with something called Cooley's toxin, because what he found was when his cancer patients spiked a fever, their cancer radically improved. And so he observed this firsthand between the two and then looked for a way to do this. And so he worked with various bacteria that he would inject. He would
force the body. He would put a bacterium in the human body, and today we don't really need to do that because we have the benefits of the
hyperthermia without bacteria.
Hyperthermia, which is very, very important, and clearly there's benefits to both, whether you have a traditional sauna or infrared. I think infrared's becoming a little more popular because you can stay in it longer. It's a little more comfortable. But once again, it goes back to the term that we've used before, and I want to educate you on this term. It's called hormesis. And hormesis is putting your body in a very uncomfortable situation for a short period of time. And I consider 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes, a short period of time. You're stressing the body out. You're raising that core temperature. You're getting detoxification, and there's just tremendous benefits with circulation, relaxation, just sitting there and enjoying the benefits of the heat for a short period of time. Certainly, you have to be responsible. Follow the instructions of the manufacturer. You can overdo it as well, and you don't want to overdo it because it's basically a lifestyle. If you have to start off slow, if it's 10 minutes, it's 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and you just build yourself up. You stay hydrated, you get your minerals, and you do this in conjunction as a lifestyle. It has to be habit forming, Dr. Burdette.
Absolutely.
And like anything else, as humans, we are creatures of habit. And our goal here is to inspire you, to galvanize you to take action, to look at all of these benefits, what we have around in our society right now. We did not have this technology a couple decades ago. Now we're seeing more and more Americans taking action. And I applaud you for taking action. Hey, this is Rethink My Health. Dr. Gez Agolli here, talking about the benefits of sauna therapy, heat therapy. We're really getting deep, no pun intended, into the benefits. When we get back after this break, now we're going to tackle medically supervised hyperthermia, what it does to the body, why has it been studied, and what can it do for cancer, Lyme disease, even cardiovascular disease has benefits. We'll be back in a moment. Stay tuned. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like you've been doing everything right, seeing doctors, trying medication, changing your diet, but you're still not getting real answers? At Progressive Medical Center, that's exactly who our team sees every day. We work with people who are tired of being told their labs are normal, but they don't feel normal. Patients dealing with fatigue, brain fog, hormonal imbalances, weight struggles, or chronic conditions that are just not improving. Our approach is totally different. We don't just manage symptoms, we look deeper. Using advanced testing and a functional medicine approach, we help uncover why your body's out of balance and create a plan that's specifically tailored for you. Now, I'll be honest, this isn't a quick fix. Real healing takes time and it takes the right strategy. But if you're ready to finally understand what's going on with your health, we're here to help guide you. If this sounds like you, I invite you to take that first step. Visit us at progressivemedicalcenter.com and let's start getting you real answers. Welcome back. Welcome back. What an exciting segment. We could talk about the benefits of saunas, traditional saunas, infrared saunas. But I want to devote this next segment of our podcast and radio show to medically supervised full body hyperthermia. One of the reasons I want to talk about this is that I had the privilege of visiting Germany with Dr. Burdette and another colleague that works at Progressive Medical, Joshua Lovern. He's our VP of Director of Operations. And I've personally been studying full body hyperthermia for the past decade. I've always been fascinated with infrared saunas. I've always been fascinated with saunas, and I've been using saunas personally myself for 25 plus years consistently. And I just see tremendous benefits. And I want to share that knowledge with all of you. Why full body hyperthermia? Why is it medically supervised? Because it's definitely a different level. And most of you are saying, so what's the difference? I just have a sauna, I can do that. Well, medically supervised is exactly what it basically is. It's medically supervised. You'll have licensed practitioners there with you. The treatment could be as short as 45 minutes, sometimes 2 to 3 different hours. And when we were in Germany, Dr. Burdette actually had the treatment itself, and it was just fascinating to watch his core temperature slowly go up to 104.5 to 104.9, medically supervised, of course, using all their different devices. And it's really unique. And why would you do this strategy? Well, Dr. Burdette mentioned earlier about cancer, also Lyme disease. I want to stay with cancer for just a second. But the full body hypothermia from Germany, the company is called Van Arden. And why am I so impressed with Van Arden Corporation is that the founder, Dr. Manfred Van Arden, actually had numerous patents, I believe over 100 patents, and he developed this very specific electric microscope, the first of its kind, and he actually worked with Otto Warburg, who won a Nobel Prize for the Warburg effect. For those of you that have been following cancer and the advancements of cancer, there's something called the Warburg effect, which we believe as functional doctors. So that was really interesting to see that the founder there. He also developed a treatment called exercise with oxygen, which we happen to use here as well for our cancer patients, which is a different strategy on flooding the body with oxygen, as Otto Warburg has shown that cancer cells are anaerobic and they will not thrive in an oxygen-rich environment. And also there's a metabolic glycolysis pathway that he was talking about as well, which we believe and support. But that's one of the reasons why we've been studying full body hyperthermia. At Progressive Medical, we applied for a study and we were approved to do a study on the benefits of full body hyperthermia, and that's going to be available soon here at Progressive Medical under a study setting. I'm very excited about that. What got me really interested on really researching and bringing full body hyperthermia is we had several patients that came to Progressive, did all the different therapies. They actually did some conventional oncology. One in particular went to Holland for 2 weeks, and it was amazing when he returned and he came back to our team, saw Dr. Bouquet and Magnus Nathan, our nurse practitioner, and literally he had a scan, 95% of his cancer was gone. And that got our whole team thinking, is that, listen, they're doing all these great therapies, and once they had a full body hypothermia, once they got that body's core temperature to physiological degree and heat shock proteins elevated, and macrophages and phagocytosis as something that you've talked about previously, the patients started to get better. So we set out a mission to try to get this equipment in the United States, and you know, thankfully we came across Hypertherm with Von Arden, and we got approved for our study, and we're just excited to bring it because I think it could be a game changer for a lot of these patients suffering with advanced chronic disease, such as these challenging cancers. Full body hypothermia, Dr. Bett.
Yes.
It's basically putting heat on steroids. You talked about the improvement of circulation, enhancing immune function. What's really interesting about the full body, it actually increases the tumor sensitivity, and it actually activates heat shock proteins, what you said earlier, on a totally different level. Let's talk a little bit about why. Why is there such a difference between just a regular sauna and now this full body, right? Full body, where the patient is laying down in a controlled setting. Kind of walk through the differences that you've seen on that.
It's an exponential difference. As you move into that range of, 1, 2, 3, 4, you need to be medically supervised. But as you're in that range and you're heating up the entire body and the core, you get exponential increase in terms of your ability to turn on signals that downregulate tumors and also kill infections. And so those two things are really important in a cancer patient. And I know that you got interested in this because you've been tracking the science for years and years, but that you also were observing patients that were going and utilizing medical grade hyperthermia in Europe and seeing impressive outcomes as they did that. So as a visionary working to figure out ways to bring this technology to the US, and so very excited to be on the forefront of that. But as you get into that range, different things happen. It's more effective in terms of signals that will downregulate production of tumors. It's more effective in terms of killing infections. Let me just take a little bit of a sidestep for a second. Lyme disease is something that can affect people very chronically, and they can become very ill with it. And one of the reasons for that is there's certain infections that get very good at hiding inside the tissue space. Well, heat will do things to drive out not only toxins, but infections that are hiding as well. And so now all the standard therapies for something like Lyme disease, various antibiotics or things that are antimicrobial, work a heck of a lot better because we've got it out of its hiding space. Heat will also bust up something called a biofilm that bugs use to protect themselves from agents that will kill them. And so if all that is, and that's also important important to the cancer patient because what we find is that there are often infections in the system that have lowered the immune system that make it easier to go on and unfortunately get a cancer diagnosis. Or what we also see is just, I want people to think back. Have you not felt yourself since maybe an infection with COVID? Well, that can reactivate other infections in your body, and heat will very non-specifically kill all of those bugs. So we're not trading one infection for another. So it stimulates the immune system at the same time that it decreases things like tumor body burden. And if you can do those things together, see, this is one of the problems with chemotherapeutics. I'll call them a necessary evil in a way. We need that toxicity to kill the cancer cell, but the therapeutic range is very small. And so what happens is it now kills off the immune system too. And many times it can lower your white blood cell count so much that you're not even a candidate for therapy anymore. So if we can harness heat that increases immune function while decreasing tumor body burden, that's a beautiful win-win.
That's a win-win. And I want to be very, very clear to our viewers and listeners that this is not a standalone treatment.
Correct.
Full body hyperthermia for cancer, Lyme disease. It's a strategy to help the other treatments that you are going through with your oncologist to make them more effective, less side effects, and better outcomes. And every patient out there that are battling these serious, I call them advanced chronic diseases, because they really are chronic diseases. And, you know, when someone gets diagnosed with the big C, the big cancer, there's a lot of fear there, and I understand that. And we've had so many different patients. And I recently spoke to a cancer coach who battled stage 4 colorectal cancer, and she was just basically written off by her doctor, and she had to self-advocate for herself. And throughout this whole journey, she was sharing with me that one of the most important things is to become resilient and to work on your terrain. And she incorporated some of these strategies. I don't think she did full body hyperthermia because it wasn't available, but she did all of these different strategies as well to change your terrain. You have to change your terrain regardless of what you're fighting, your disease. You just don't take these medications. You don't abandon the traditional oncology because it can actually work synergistically if you do it correctly. Whether you decide to do that or not, it's your decision. But you have to take this approach, multifactorial approach, and heat therapy is just going to benefit you in a controlled environment. That's why I want to go back to that word hormesis. It's a very short period of time to put your body into a very unphysiological state. And that's why it has to be medically supervised, because you're raising the body's core temperature. And we believe, based on the research, that Hypertherm, the Varn Arden Corporation, definitely has the cutting edge equipment because you're not sitting in an oven. Actually, it's an open end. If you just visualize sitting down at open end in these heat coils, and it's water sensitive to cool, so it cannot burn the skin, which is interesting because a lot of individuals out there have tried hypothermia in other countries, and sometimes it can have those particular side effects. And the other thing is you don't have to be there for 3 to 5 hours. You know, you can be as low as some of the researchers talking 90 minutes. Lyme disease is a little longer. It's got to be at least 2 hours plus because of the biofilm. But then if you're taking the medication or if you're doing chemotherapy or radiation, and interestingly enough, we were interviewing a retired board-certified oncologist, Dr. Meekin, was telling me that he was using hyperthermia when he was practicing, and he had less use of radiation and better outcomes on shrinking tumors. So this is something that has been going on for a while, right?
Yes.
The United States is just taking some time there, and hopefully with this study that we're doing, IRB study, that it's going to get more research and it's going to make more available for every American. That's the goal. That's my vision, that every American actually has the ability to decide if they want full body hypothermia.
Yes.
But listen, you can start with saunas, you can start with infrared. If you can't do that, there's even some research on doing hot baths.
Yes, absolutely.
So you have to do what you can, what you have, right? And start with something. But if you're battling this advanced chronic disease, cancer, Lyme disease, even what's interesting, Dr. Burdette, when we were at the headquarters in Germany. They actually did studies on hypertension. This was amazing. They had well over 30 or 40 patients, and they did 8 hyperthermia sessions in a controlled setting just for 60 minutes, 45 minutes to 60 minutes. And the systolic, which the average was well above 180, and the diastolic was well above 110, brought it down about 25, 30%
Wow.
to like 130, 140 after 8 sessions. And guess what? Even after 6 months of this therapy, the numbers were the same.
That's so impressive.
Why is that? You mentioned earlier, cardiovascular,
Yeah.
angiogenesis. The human body has 60 to 80,000 miles of vessels. It just opens it up. This is exciting, right?
It really is. Imagine if you could do 6 treatments and put hypertension in remission for at least half a year. And that's just how long they tracked it in the study. So now add to that, if we're going to fold in some diet and lifestyle, maybe get a little weight off. And I would challenge our listeners out there to put a thermometer next to your bed. And I want you to take your temperature in the morning before you get out of bed. We all know normal's 98.6. I want you to see if you're hitting even 98, because a lot of you out there will not be, and this will surprise you. And so if your core temperature, if you're walking around lower, your metabolism is lower, it's easier to gain weight. The rate at which you're clearing toxins is lower. Your vessels aren't practicing like they should. And again, heat is an environment that's unfavorable to cancer cell growth. And so check in, see where you're at, see if hyperthermia is something that you might benefit from. And if your body temperature is low, I want you to think about your thyroid function as well. We can talk about that and help you with that over at Progressive. But it's a big deal. It is an indicator of metabolism. And metabolism is not only weight loss, but it's the rate that we clear toxins. It's the rate we clear inflammatory mediators. It's what wakes up our immune system. And so we want to have a healthy metabolism. For example, we would know that a diabetic patient doesn't really have the best metabolism, and they also have an increased risk of cancer. And so metabolism is not just staying thin. It's a lot more than that. It's how your engine is running and how you're eliminating things from the system.
Absolutely. It's how your body metabolizes nutrients at the cellular level. And it's so important to have a very, very robust metabolism. And it's interesting you mentioned about your temperatures, because Dr. Broda Barnes, he was a very, very well-known medical doctor, 40s, 50s, and 60s, and he actually had the Barnes basal temperature. It was actually the PDR for a while, right? Where you take your axillary temperature, and he was talking about thyroid issues, of course, which thyroid is so, so important. You know, your thyroid gland is the size of a butterfly, but it's so powerful, and it really affects how your metabolism utilizes at the cellular level nutrients as well. And that's what's really exciting about the hyperthermia. Let's break it down again. Hyper, more, thermia, heat. More heat is going to help you not only stay healthy, but if you have an advanced chronic disease, it's just a great strategy to help you beat this disease in conjunction with whatever the therapy you and your doctor and practitioners decide to do. If you're doing straight traditional medicine, absolutely, the benefits of sauna are going to help you. Ask your practitioner about hyperthermia. The studies are very, very clear. Very, very few clinics actually have this technology. I do know of some clinics in Arizona as well. At Progressive Medical, we're doing everything we can, and we did get approved for a study, and we're going to be starting that shortly. It's going to be very, very controlled, but it's really, really exciting. And hopefully we can get hypothermia in the future in this country as a forefront treatment option in conjunction with all these other therapies. I want to be very, very clear. This does not replace your other therapies. This is adjunctive. This is something that you have to do in addition to other therapies, just like anything else, right? You have to do a synergistic approach. And you know, what's exciting, Dr. Burdette, about the full body hyperthermia is that the studies are very, very clear that it actually weakens the cancer cells, right? The heat shock proteins really weaken. So whether you're doing chemo, radiation, whether you're doing a functional integrative approach, and speaking to the German physicians, Dr. Noah Orlinsky was talking about this as well, and he trains all of the physicians that use full body hypothermia. And there's a window of opportunity. And that window of opportunity is about 24 hours pre or 24 hours post. He was talking about it's better to do the hypothermia first, and then you do the therapies either right after or a day, maybe 2 days after. Because when you're raising the body's core temperature, and Dr. Burdette said this because he had the treatment himself, he noticed almost immediately after the treatment, I observed this treatment, his core temperature went up to 104.9, and it stayed there for a while. It brought it down slowly. And all his vital signs were monitored, his blood pressure was monitored, his pulse rate was monitored, everything was done in this very safe environment, and he was well hydrated, and they protected his scalp and his brain with cold compresses. But he basically said his joint pain was gone. He felt euphoric, like really interesting, euphoric, and obviously he felt a little fatigued afterwards because of the heat. But it definitely was interesting to watch. And as you mentioned earlier, with the research, improved circulation, the immune function, bringing that immune system back into overdrive, which is really, really exciting.
Absolutely. And just to be able to harness the natural wisdom of the body, we know that the body is wise, the vitality of the system. And so mimicking what the body would do, mimicking a fever, we can mimic this wisdom that the body has to heal. And just like you said, an adjunctive therapy to support the immune system, to support the body. And I think that this is such an important piece of integrative medicine, that we don't just want to treat a condition. We want to treat the person as well. We need to do things to build the human being, and this moves in that direction, building immune function, waking it up, forcing viruses out of the system, a really beautiful way to help people get better. And so back 20 plus years ago in naturopathic medical school, we would do, like you said, baths, and we would put people in there, and we'd have them keep a thermometer in their mouth to see how much their temperature would go up. And we could get their temperature up to maybe 101 or 102 doing that. But this pushes it even further, and so gives an additional opportunity for things that to make other therapies work better, to make sure that we're keeping the immune system alive as we're going through those things, and really just help people turn a corner when some of the standard therapies alone haven't been enough.
Absolutely. And let's be very clear. If you can't have access to a sauna infrared, there are benefits to these hot baths as well. That's another strategy. I actually believe that if you're a non-sweater, even if you go in a sauna, a lot of you may be listening and say, I've tried going in a sauna, I don't sweat. If that's the case, maybe you need to go in a hot bath prior, 5, 10, 15 minutes, and then you go in there. You slowly work yourself up. You can actually do a strategy where you do a vigorous walk before, and then maybe going for a sauna. The bottom line is this: the research is clear. Minimum 3 days a week, right? 3 days a week. Make this a lifestyle. Make it habit forming. It's just like walking, right? We're not even going to debate anymore why walking anywhere from 5,000 to 7,500 steps a day. I think the sweet spot is 7,000. If you can go up to 10,000, that's great. That is actually going to extend your life. That is actually going to help your circulation. That's going to help stress reduction. Listen, we're living right now all-time high on stress and anxiety. And you know, when you have all of this stress and anxiety, cortisol goes up. And when cortisol goes up physiologically, it does damage. It does damage to the cell. It's a very important hormone, don't get me wrong, right? But when you have too much of it, it's going to cause damage. As a matter of fact, Dr. Burdette, you educated us about prostate. You had some research.
Very sensitive to cortisol, 300 times more sensitive than it is to testosterone. So many of us think about prostate cells and men's health and how testosterone might make prostate cancer cells grow. Maybe not. You know, there's some debate out there. But in general, men go on hormone blockades if they get prostate cancer. But even more than testosterone spurring growth are stress hormones. One of the things that heating up your system does is it makes you more resilient to stress. You're practicing again. And so that, and in fact, one of the things that is when we increase heat shock proteins, one of the things they do is they grab a hold of that stress hormone, that cortisol, and they keep it from interfering with our DNA. They keep it from turning on inflammation and damaging pathways in our system. That's what stress does. It literally interacts with our DNA to create inflammation, and heat shock proteins interrupt that.
Well, listen, at the end of the day, just try it yourself. Do a hot bath and you're just totally relaxed, okay? Go in infrared sauna, you're totally relaxed, okay? So we're explaining to you physiologically what's happening, okay? Cortisol at excess levels actually damages many components of the body. For men, listen, if you're battling BPH or prostate cancer, ask your practitioner to measure your 4 specimens of cortisol, not just a blood test, right? Ask for the saliva, which looks like circadian rhythm, and the chances are it's probably going to be high on most individuals, and that could affect your prostate itself. Hey, Rethink My Health, what a great podcast this is. I want to implore you to look at the benefits of heat therapy, okay? Not a standalone treatment. It's part of a strategy. Whether you've got cancer, whether you have some type of other chronic diseases, you're going to benefit from heat therapy. Dr. Burdette, we just have a couple minutes. What other words of wisdom do we have for our listeners? I know you and I are so excited with the rest of the team here at Progressive on this full body hyperthermia. If you're interested in the study, contact us, email us at Progressive Medical, and we'll tell you a little bit more about the study on the full body hyperthermia. That should be happening sometime in the middle of August, at the very latest, hopefully no later than September. We're going to have that available, and typically we're going to be reserving that for most patients that are battling an advanced chronic disease, okay? Of course, you can get the benefit for wellness, but this is something we're utilizing for that. And we're doing a study on microplastics, and we're doing a study on oxidative stress. And we believe, our hypothesis is that by going over having 6 to 8 sessions, we believe we're going to bring down that body burden of microplastics and reduce oxidative stress. That's our hypothesis. And the benefit, you're going to get that heat shock protein, and you're going to see your metabolism and your immune system enhance.
Yes, absolutely. So if you're out there suffering and nobody's been able to help you with that, here are some tools that can push that story forward. Whether or not it's a chronic infection that hasn't been identified, whether or not it is poor metabolism making you tired, whether or not it's toxic body burden that's just wearing your system down, heat wakes up your body, engages the wisdom of the body to do that, what we call vis medicatrix, the body's inherent wisdom to heal. Turn that on, and you can turn the symptoms around. You can turn your health around.
And that's what a doctor's job is. Doctor in Latin is docere, means teacher, and we're here to teach you to take action. And you know, just to clarify, there's tremendous benefits in hot baths, tremendous benefits in a traditional Finnish sauna. You can enhance it when it comes to the infrared. Full body hypothermia has to be medically supervised. And what really makes it different, it's the wavelength. The wavelength of full body hypothermia actually will reach the hypodermis, which is the bottom layer of the skin, and it brings up the core temperature. And that's the difference. But start off with the infrared, start off with the Finnish sauna, which is fantastic. Do it responsibly. Talk to your practitioner, talk to your team, whether it's your health coach or not. Dr. Burdette, thank you so much for your wisdom on heat therapy. And remember, Proverbs 17:22, a cheerful heart is good medicine, but a crushed spirit dries the bones. Incorporate happiness, incorporate laughter therapy into your treatments. God bless you guys, and we're going to see you next time here on Rethink My Health.